We spend a lot of time thinking about death, and usually it's not in a good way. But what if we're looking at it all wrong? Today, we're going to explore a really unique perspective on life's ultimate transition, one that sees it not as a terrifying end, but as a natural process. And we'll be doing it through the scientific and spiritual philosophy of Master E.K. So, just to be clear, everything we're about to dive into comes straight from this one source, the book The Science of Death. Think of this as our guide. We're not saying this is the only way to see things, but we're exploring this specific and, I gotta say, pretty fascinating philosophy on the subject. Okay, so where does this whole philosophy even begin? Well, it starts by tackling a question that, let's be honest, probably keeps a lot of us up at night. While pretty much every creature has a survival instinct, why are humans the only ones who seem to be genuinely tormented by the fear of our own end? And the answer, according to this way of thinking, is actually found in the nature of fear itself. It turns out that our greatest tool, our intellect, might also be our greatest burden when it comes to this stuff. This is where we get to a really key distinction. For an animal, right, fear is pretty simple. It's a tool. It's for survival, right here, right now. But for us humans, we take that same basic instinct and our intellect just grabs onto it, blows it up, and shoots it way into the future. And that projection, that's what turns a simple survival instinct into this constant nagging anxiety about something that hasn't even happened yet. And the result of all that? Our logic, our very way of thinking, becomes what the book calls death conditioned. And if you think about it, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? So many of our plans, our goals, they're all framed by this idea of getting it all done before I die. Our own mortality becomes this silent, super stressful deadline for everything. So if the problem is how we perceive death, then the solution has to be about changing that perception, right? This is where the philosophy starts to build a totally new framework. It reframes death not as some big catastrophe, but as a simple, natural process, a change. So let's start with the basics. At its most clinical, the book defines death like this. It's just a biochemical change. The building blocks of the biological kingdom, our cells, they just decompose back into the building blocks of the mineral kingdom, atoms. It's framed as a transfer, not a termination. See the difference? But then we get a much warmer and honestly, a much more comforting analogy that completely shifts the perspective. What if death is just like sleep? According to this quote, it's pretty much the same thing. The only difference is when we wake up from sleep, it's in the same body. When we wake up from death, well, it's in a different one.
And this idea gets reinforced with even more beautiful, gentle comparisons. Think about a ripe fruit just effortlessly separating from its tree, or an employee who, after a long career, simply returns the company car. The job's done. Each of these images is designed to strip away the violence and trauma we usually associate with death and replace it with a sense of natural, peaceful, and totally normal transition.
Okay, now things get even more specific, and this is where it gets really interesting. The philosophy suggests that while that transition is definitely inevitable for all of us, the experience of that transition is not. There are actually two very distinct ways of departing this life. On one hand, you have what's called the death of the person. This is the one that involves fear, suffering, a loss of consciousness. The book describes it almost like a surgical operation that nature has to perform on someone who's unprepared. But then there's the other path, dropping of the body. This is a conscious, totally painless, and instantaneous transition. It's called a mature death. So what's the difference maker here? It's your mindset. That's the crucial point. According to this view, the less fear you carry into that moment, the more conscious and the less painful your final transition is going to be. And that, right there, brings us to what's probably the most practical and actionable part of this whole philosophy. Because if a peaceful death is the goal, the work isn't really about dying at all. It's all about how you choose to live, right here, right now. This quote just nails it. It really gets to the heart of the matter. Preparing for death isn't some last-minute checklist or ritual. It's about the clarity of the life you lead beforehand. A clear life, this philosophy suggests, just naturally leads to a clear transition. One follows the other.
So, what does a clear life even look like? Well, the book lays out three core principles. First, being broad-minded and compassionate. Second, cultivating what it calls an instinctive detachment, not being unfeeling, but not being desperately attached to outcomes. And third, behaving with a sense of responsibility towards all of life. These things are basically presented as the direct antidote to that death-conditioned logic we talked about earlier. They're the way you stop living under that constant, stressful, silent deadline.
Really, it all boils down to this one super powerful idea. If you focus on living a conscious life, a life of awareness, compassion, and responsibility, then a conscious death will naturally take care of itself. The preparation isn't for the end, it's for the now.
And to tie all of these ideas together, the book ends with this really beautiful and powerful story. It's an allegory that basically wraps up this entire perspective on life and death.
So the story is about this young boy, and he's different. Unlike everyone else, he has absolutely no fear of death. So what does he do? He journeys directly to the kingdom of the Lord of Death himself, because he wants to understand the great mystery firsthand. When he gets there, he goes right up to the Lord of Death and asks to enter the one room that everybody else is terrified of, that final dark room, the one from which, it is said, no one ever returns. Now, the Lord of Death is intrigued, so he tests the boy. He offers him everything you can imagine: long life, incredible riches, immense power, anything to try and distract him from his goal. But the boy doesn't waver for a second. He's totally unshaken. So, impressed by this incredible courage, the Lord of Death agrees and leads him to the doorway. So the boy walks up to this great archway, and carved right into the stone above it is the word death. He takes a breath, and he steps through to the other side. And when he's through, he turns around and looks back at the door he just came through. So, what do you think was written on that side?
2 words: the childbirth. Wow, what a profound and powerful final thought. What we call an exit from one side is just an entrance from another. It suggests that in this grand cosmic cycle, every single end is just another beginning.